Hello everyone, I'm Ryan, and in this video I want to briefly, big quotes on that, try to go over all of the different things coming in the 2.0 update for Imperator, as well as the DLCs coming with that, because I don't think everyone's kept up to date on it, and a lot of people maybe might be wondering, is the game dead? Is now the time to get back into it? What's going on there? Okay, so in this video I want to try to run through all the developer diaries to just try to briefly say, uh, what's the deal in each of these, and I'll put a link to this in the description so that you can look at it all a little bit more in depth if you'd like. And as you can see, there are quite a number of dev diaries. We've got both these two sections here, and let's just try to get into this without too much delay. So in the first update, we had just a little rundown of some studio news. So for the past, 9 months as of September, Paradox has opened up a second studio called Thalassic to work on Imperator side by side with the main team, which is still working on it. So a lot of people wondering if, is the game dead or whatever, is Paradox dropping it? This is just a little update to say, basically, like, it kind of just makes it so that it kind of kills that argument, because they are investing more resources into this game. And even if Imperator isn't, I feel, it's not the biggest success, obviously, for Paradox, but I think it's been useful almost as like a test bed. I think if you played Imperator and then played CK3, there were a lot of things I think that they established in Imperator and maybe got a little bit more familiar with, so that for CK3's release they could really nail it with a few things. So this is just a little dev diary introducing the team. Okay, so we're just going to close this one because that's really all that was. And then in the next one, they start to talk a little bit about and give sort of a teaser for what that the second team was working on, which is called the Vitruvius update. And so there's also the Marius update, which we'll be talking about later. But the Vitruvius portion of the next update, so these updates are going to be combined into one. The Vitruvius side is what the Thalassic team has been doing, and the Marius update is the one that the main team has been working on. And so the main points to take note of from this diary is just basically saying there's some new events, some new event artwork, and they kind of tease it but don't go into it too much. But that's for a later diary. But one of the main things that they point out either here or in one of the next dev diaries is that the Thalassic team can't, because they are working on the code at the same time as the main team, they cannot really work on these same bits at the same time. Otherwise, it would conflict as they're, working through different things. So that's what's called parallel development. So basically, whatever the Thalassic team is working on, the main team isn't touching, and vice versa, for the most part. Okay, and so yeah, that's really it for this one. They give some teasers, and then they explain what those teasers were in the next dev diary. So in this one, they really go into what is the free content portion of the Vitruvius update, as well as the paid content, which is going to be called the Great Wonders DLC, which kind of gives away what it's about. So let's see. So for the free portion of it, we're going to have wonders will exist in the game. And so there are already wonders in the game right now, but they're just province modifiers. In the update, however, the building screen is going to have a separate little tab where you'll actually be able to build wonders. And the free portion of the update is going to have wonders that are, more historical, things like the Colossus of Rhodes, Lighthouse and Library of Alexandria, some oracles, and probably some other things like maybe Stonehenge and whatnot. So the free update portion is, let's see, it's got 8 new events, a few event images, and yeah, so no number for like the number of wonders, but I believe somewhere they mention also that what you'll be able to build might be based on like resources, so you might need to have stone or something to work on a wonder. Not fully sure about that yet. But then moving along to the Great Wonders DLC, you're going to be able to see these, and I think, is it the same? I don't remember if they said if they'll be. I think they will be visible on the map in the free update as well. But they definitely will in the Great Wonders DLC, and part of that is because you're actually going to have a 3D like wonder builder tool, where you'll be able to customize your own personal wonders, and then you'll be able to build them in different areas. Okay, and so this was initially met with like kind of like a shrug, because at this point, this is nice content, but it didn't really fix some of the issues with the game. So when this was initially shown, people were kind of annoyed, or not, like they were more irritated, and you probably see it in like the comments. Let's see, there are some positive people, but you'll see a lot of like kind of like this, where it's not like about mechanics and whatnot. But if people were just kind of miffed about it a little bit. Since then, I think that's kind of died down, because the main team has been working on more of the mechanical changes that I think more of the people who enjoy the game are get a bit more excited about, myself included. But this is still a cool addition. It definitely adds a little bit of like personality and customization to the map. It just wasn't what people were really hoping for after like a bit of a wait between Dev Diaries. So then we move on to the next Dev Diary, where we introduce the Marius update. So in this, we have Argeo, the game director, talking about he's trying to like cool off like some of the backlash, I guess, that they got in the last one. And so basically, I'll just go through my notes here. So because it's we're not reading all this right now. But the main things are that Marius is going to take a bit longer than usual. This was originally called the Autumn of War update. It's now January 2021, so a little past autumn. But at least they addressed that back in autumn. So that's good, at least, I guess. So the main focuses of Marius are going to be about pacing and warfare. And so what they mean by pacing is that they want it to be more choice focused, and to make it so that you have a better sense of like identity in the world, so that your roam isn't necessarily exactly the same as other people's roam when they play. They're just going to open up more choices, okay? And then there is the warfare side of the update, which is, we're going to go into way more detail later on. There are some like massive mechanical like overhauls to core systems that are really cool, and they're very exciting to talk about, I think. And then we have a complete overhaul to the UI and user experience to the game. And Imperator's old current UI is nothing too spectacular, to say the least. This is a massive improvement. They have definitely taken some notes from CK3 as well. Like you see like the sidebar and stuff, which kind of just, they take up a bit less room on the screen. I think the outliners are smaller also, they mention, and just like the personality on a lot of the UI windows is just so much better, so much nicer. Yeah, the Senate in particular, I really like this screen, because it just feels like the seats are kind of full, and there's like a side by side. Yeah, it really is night and day. Like, this is more compact, and it feels more information dense, which is really nice. And yeah, so that's, the screenshots are nice to Google at, but you can do that in your own time. I'm going to try to keep this quicker. Okay, so in the next update, we talk about the UI rework with Jiro, fuck, I don't know. And anyway, they basically just talk about like what their job is, and giving some little inside knowledge as to like almost like what a day working as a UI or user experience specialist is like, which is kind of cool. So yeah, you see all these like sort of mock-ups and stuff, pretty neat. And then yeah, I mean, I think for the screenshot heavy stuff, I'll leave that to you to go look up if you really feel like diving into the nitty gritty. And let's see. There was also some main notes I had for this one is that in the naval engagement screen, we can see that the naval engagement width has been increased, which is just a little nugget there. It's something to glean from these screenshots. And also in one of the developer comments, I think it was, yes. So right here, Arheo is basically saying he's purging some odd to have info. So this is things like you knowing how much manpower or how many troops another nation has, as well as how much money they have, things like that. But you realistically wouldn't know necessarily about the other nation, which helps. It adds a little bit of it makes it so you have to be a little bit more cautious, and you don't know exactly when your opponents are super weak. Which is it's another thing that's in EU4 that I kind of would like to see changed as well, so that you don't when you don't have the information, it makes the choices you're making a little bit more you have to cover more options and stuff. I think it's just a little bit better for a strategy game typically, but that's just my opinion. And it's also so some people like this, some people don't, because some people just like having all the information displayed to them. That is going to be a preference thing, whether or not you approve this change or not. But yeah, and then moving on to the next dev diary, we are getting into a sort of inventions overhaul. So currently in the game, whatever your tech level is for any of the 3 categories opens up 3 possible new inventions you can get, and if you pay for them, you give some kind of buff of some kind. They're changing that so that now it's going to be a sort of tree-based progression for the 4 different tech groups. And what's cool about this is this sort of goes along with that idea of the pacing and the making more choices. The different sort of branches in these trees are going to be focused down different things. So you can read about what's different branches are roughly tied to what things, but I think the quickest sort of example of what they mean by that is for in the military tree, you have one branch that's a bit more naval focused, and the different parts might focus down different aspects of your navy, and then one might be about land troops, and one might be about sieges or something. So they all have different advantages for going down these different portions of the tree. And because you sort of have to pick the directions you're going, and you can mix and match them as much as you want, but that's going to make it so that over time your nation gets more focused on the things that you want to focus on, which helps to build a sort of identity for your nation. And so in one playthrough you might decide to go down the naval tree, and another one you might go down the the siege tree to make it so that you can just siege things really quickly, or improves your fort defense or whatever. And I think in multiplayer, this the one criticism I think that this might have is that there might be an optimal path, or if one path is 1% better, anyone who is going to pick just off of what's the best is going to do that one path that's even just 1% better, and that's a common problem you have in strategy games. An example of that is in EU4 multiplayer. There's lots of good different idea groups, but currently, the meta is just going for quantity and economic ideas, because they combine really well and they unlock a really good policy. And so, but I think it's single player. This is going to be a lot of fun, especially because you're just going to be able to choose do you want to play more tall? Do you want to play more wide? What kind of Diplo game do you want to really rock there? What bonuses to your religion do you want to do? Do you want to maybe go more tolerant, maybe, or one that's maybe more about conversion or something? Different choices like that. That adds some sort of a personality to the game, which I really like. Okay. So at this time in this dev diary, they also said that you'll still be able to unlock inventions with money. And a lot of people, myself included, were kind of criticizing them for that. Or at least not criticizing, but giving feedback that a lot of people don't really like that. And since then, in a later dev diary, they say that they have actually removed the gold cost, and now the only way that you'll unlock things in the tree is through these innovations. Okay, so every time you go up in a tech level, you'll be able to pick one of these for free. Okay, and I'm trying to remember. Okay, so it's in some other dev diary. they also show that like there seems to be like some things that give a cost reduction to the inventions, and those cost reductions, I'm not sure. So like given how it looked in one of the screenshots, the way I would assume how that works is if you have 1 point to spend and this reduces the cost by 10%, maybe you only spend 0.9 of your, I think it's like innovation point level, something like that. So then you'd be left with a 0.1. So maybe every 10 techs you would actually get an extra point. Not sure if that's how that works, or if maybe that's a leftover from when there was a gold cost. So that's up in the air, because I noticed that I think in a later dev diary. I think yeah, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, let's see what else I have here. Yeah, just that, and then at the bottom here they also show the new Atlas map mode, or they just give a teaser for it. They don't explain what it is yet. Since then, they sort of confirmed that you'll have. I'm not sure if these are just cities of a certain size or if these are the province capitals. Like you don't see a province capital over here in this province, so I'm assuming that it's probably just cities of like at least this many pops or something. And then other things that are like holy sites will appear here, and these dotted lines are roads. Okay. Yeah, that's all I have for this one. Moving on to the next one. This is a really big meaty one. Personally, whenever I see Trentragulas making it, I get very excited because it's usually very mechanics focused, because he is the I believe the system designer or something along those lines. I mean, it's also his game designer, but I think he's normally focused on the more systemic and like mechanical aspects of the game. And in regard to this dev diary, it's all about the new levy system. Or actually, is it yet? Let me see. No, this is not about levies yet. my mistake, sorry. There are a lot of really juicy changes in this one, though. So the first one is that combat width is now going to be more determined based on the battlefield you're fighting. And what this is really cool for is it's going to make it's not just going to be, mountains have, the -2 to your roll if you're if you're defending, your opponent gets a -2 to their roll, which helps you overall and whatnot. As well as like some troops can have bonuses in different terrains. But now, because combat width is changing, it's going to make it so that it is going to be even like more powerful to be able to like choke a point like a mountain. Or another thing they introduce are these things called gates, which have even further reduced combat width, which is it adds a little bit of depth to the game, I think, in terms of the positioning of your armies and maneuvering. Okay. So let me see. Also, they have like the terrain type as sort of like the background, which I actually like quite a bit on the battle UI. Okay. Let's see, what else do I have in my notes? Yeah. Where did they show the gates? Because I have that in here. It might be a little later. Right here. So these gates. So this is in right by Syria. These gates, and what they get is +4 attrition, whatever. It's not like too big a deal. But the main thing is the combat width being decreased. Now, one thing I noted about these gates, and I don't know if this will be the case for all gates, but the thing that's kind of like about this is that it's in uninhabited territory. And so because of that, you can't build a fort here. So it's going to cost, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to defend this. Because if you could just put a fort here, your opponent could move onto it, and then you could hit them while they're on it, and you would still be considered the defender. Because it's uninhabited, going to be a little bit harder to do that. You'll still be able to, like, if an army is walking this way, once they lock in, you could maybe force march and get there first with maybe a unit of light cav, and then rush into to reinforce that battle with the rest of your army. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential in the sort of interactions you can have with these. They will be a little bit more difficult to make use of than forts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Okay. Another thing is that here they just point out that the naval combat width is also just larger in open seas. I don't know if it'll be like if there'll be different like terrain types for water, like maybe by Salamis, it has a smaller combat width or something. That'd be pretty interesting. But I'm not sure if they've said that anywhere. Let's see. Another thing to note, which I think we can see in the first one. Yeah. So the unit size has actually been reduced from 1,000 per unit to 500, which is it's a bit closer to what a cohort is, at least in Rome's sort of organization of its armies. And overall, this sort of what would you say? Like it makes it feel the numbers feel a little bit more realistic, you know. But yeah, that's just a minor thing. Another thing is that forts are getting a bit of a change. So first, let me see. Do they mention? Okay, so for one thing, okay, or occupation right here. So they basically say that if you siege all the forts, or if there's no forts and you just siege the province capital, then you will automatically occupy the whole province, which is just a massive time saver, nice quality of life thing. Some people I think were a little annoyed at this though, because that means you can't go around sieging all the individual territories to get slaves out of each of them, which was pretty beneficial. But yeah, I personally prefer that a lot more because it just saves a lot of micro, and it can be just a bit annoying. Okay. But another change that they have done is that there is now a fort limit for every province. So every province is going to have 5 sort of fort points, and so it's basically each fort in its own settlement or city will cost 3 points. Additional forts in the same settlement or city will only cost 1 extra point. Okay, and this is just a soft limit, so you can actually have more. You can put more forts than the limit would allow. It's going to cost you extra maintenance. Okay, so if it's beneficial to put 2 forts in the province in 2 different areas, you can still do that. It's just going to cost you a bit more money. Okay. And I believe they also mentioned that like some techs or whatever can increase the fort limit size. So that's that's useful. Maybe some nation heritages or something will also give bonuses there. And yeah, that's basically it for forts. Mechanically they're the same, other than if you occupy them all, they'll siege down all the rest of the territory in the province. Another new addition, which I think this one's really cool to me, is the engineer cohort. So kind of like the supply train unit, this is not really a combat-oriented unit. This unit is specifically designed for improving sieges, and also it makes it so that building roads is going to be a little bit cheaper. Okay. Also, one more thing I wanted to note on the province fort limit. Some different areas on the map, it sounds like, are going to have like a bonus, maybe from like a wonder or something, that increases their fort limit. Okay, so that's pretty neat. And going back to the engineers, so the main advantages is that they're going to make your sieges quicker. So the thing is basically if you have 1 engineer for every fort in the province, you'll get a +1 to your roll. So let me see. Yeah. So basically, for every engineer divided by the fort level, you gain +1. So what that means is if you're on a province with 1 fort, every engineer gives you +1 to your roll. If you're on a province with 2 forts, okay, you will get a +1 to your roll for every 2 engineers you have. So if you have 4 engineers on a province with 2 forts, you'll get a +2 to your roll. Okay. Another really cool bonus is that engineers, if you have 1 engineer for every 10 units, you can negate the river crossing penalty. And that includes straits as well. So like if you're trying to, I think especially in multiplayer this will be useful, but it could also be helpful in like single player. But like I think especially in multiplayer, if maybe like one of your friends is like Thrace and maybe you're the Antagonids or vice versa or something. I think this is going to make it so that if you want to cross the Bosphorus, a way to make it a lot easier is going to be including some engineers in your army, which is that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. And then the sort of final big bonus that the engineers have is that they make it so that building roads is a lot cheaper with them, which is good because I like roads a lot. So I want to have like 1,000,000 engineers, but the downside to having 1,000,000 engineers is that they have a unusually high cost to both recruit and maintain. So I don't know how much higher it is, but it sounds like, to maintain a large core of engineers, you're going to have a very strong economy and whatnot to sort of maintain that. So maybe think of like a more like empire level like thing. So they definitely have a high value, but they will also have a high cost. So they're not just going to be like, you know, like a go-to every time. You do need to consider like, I could have one engineer, or maybe I could afford 2 units of light cav, or maybe 3. I don't know. We don't know what the costs are yet, and they're definitely subject to change right now since it's all still in development. But yeah, I think these are pretty cool addition. Then we have province trading, and this is basically just you can now like press a button somewhere, and your governors will manage all the trade routes in their provinces, which is great for micro because that was always a pain in the ass when you were really big. And then finally, they talk about the Atlas map mode a little bit more, and it does look pretty darn good. I think this is definitely going to be a favored map mode for screenshots, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, any other notes for this one? Let's see. No, I think that's it. All right, so moving on to the next dev diary. In this one, they talk about some new changes to the military traditions. And so specifically, the main change here is to the structure. So like every culture group, or like every different military tradition group, because they don't necessarily correspond to the culture groups. They're usually, based around those though. But they are all now there's going to be 2 of them per like tradition group, whatever you call them. And so, for instance, for the Greek, you have one that's based on the Greek kingdoms, and one based on the Greek sort of city-states, basically. And regardless, just so long as you have Greek traditions, you'll be able to go down either one of them. And the main thing is that they're now trees instead of just the linear sort of 3 lines, which again sort of just incentivizes that sort of that focusing down different things that you want. It makes it more decision based. You'll differentiate yourself a lot more over the course of the game, which I like a lot. Okay. And so one of the other really cool things that's like one of my favorite changes here is that in these traditions, you will be able to embrace other traditions. Now, this will sort of cost you one of your traditions, but then it will unlock another sort of branch somewhere. And so, like, as a Greek, you're able to embrace a Levantine tradition. So Levantine being sort of like the Phoenician and like Hebrew like traditions, which are mostly focused on like naval stuff. So like you get the bonuses from like a Greek navy, and then go into the Levantine one and really just focus down that. And so the only limiting factors between what ones you can and can't embrace are that you'll generally only be able to embrace ones that are geographically next to in this case the Greeks, or the Romans, or whatever. And their reasoning behind that, which I thought was kind of funny, was that they don't want you to just, as like a bunch of barbarians, conquer Egypt. Not even conquer Egypt, but maybe like get like one. So the other limiting factor is that you need to integrate a culture from this, like, so in this case the Levantine group. So you might need to embrace the Phoenicians or someone in order to get their military traditions. So they don't want you to just as a migratory tribe, send a few like troops down, go siege down raid a few provinces in Egypt, take a few people slaves, and then embrace that, and then just as a barbarian in Germany have Egyptian traditions, which conceptually is very funny. So it's a little bit of a bummer there, but it's probably a bit more immersive that way. So fine, whatever. But yeah, and yeah, so you'll just need to integrate one of these groups, and it will have to be one of the groups that is geographically adjacent to either the Greeks or whoever. So you can kind of like mix your armies, like you can maybe get bonuses, like Greek bonuses to heavy infantry, and then like integrate like a Persian culture, and then maybe like get bonuses to cavalry or something. So I think this will definitely be something that I think is in multiplayer going to be like min maxed a bit more, because like it does cost you one extra military tradition to just embrace them, but like if it's like more optimal to like go down like this far in Italian traditions and then go this far in Greek traditions and whatnot, I think that's just it's definitely more fun, I think, from the min maxing perspective. Um, and then let's see, somewhere in here they also mentions that let's see, I think yeah. So they were talking about like the constructive feedback from the other inventions thing. So they've just gotten rid of the gold cost for inventions here, so that this is where they mention that. And yeah, right here is where I was talking about that they still have the like invention cost reduction from, in this case, the Acropolis of Pergamon. So I don't know if this will just cost like 0.9 of an invention point or what. But yeah, that's yeah, I don't know if this is just a leftover or just something that actually will take a point off of that. But yeah, and then so let's see, what do they mention here specifically about inventions? Let's see. So like I guess they talk a little bit about there's the sort of game design of the inventions, and specifically they're talking about basically look at how many inventions there are here. You're not going to be able to get all of them in a playthrough unless you break the game, and it's a paradox game, so someone will probably find a way. But you generally will not be able to get all of the inventions in a single campaign. Which what that does is it adds a lot more weight to your decisions. So like when you go down one path, like that's your thing kind of. And like another country, maybe an AI or something goes down another path, and now all of a sudden it's sort of like this asymmetric balancing, but like they're better at something else and you're better at this thing, so like you need to play to your strengths and whatnot. And I think it's just I think that's a good move. Yeah, but like again, it just I do have a little bit of a concern that like one of these trees will be a little bit more beneficial than the other ones, so that you like you people who are just going for maximum efficiency might go down like the same tree, like the same route down the trees every time. Which that's probably something that's going to happen to some degree. Like for the most part, people probably are going to ignore the naval tree in the military traditions one. But then again, at least in multiplayer, like someone could just kind of dunk on everyone just for going naval, and then like conquering like every island for free because they have a good navy and everyone just has a mediocre one. But yeah, and then they mentioned these cornerstone inventions or keystone inventions, and what these ones are, they're marked with sort of like a star or something, and or like this sort of border, and they just tend to have stronger effects than the regular inventions. They can also have like one-shot effects on them. So like let's see. Okay, well, like I've seen somewhere, like some of them, like will just give you an instant, like here's 50 political influences and some other bonus for them. So that's cool. It's like for scripting for mods, that could be kind of cool. You might be able to do some very unique things with that. But yeah, the general idea of the cornerstone or keystone inventions is that they're just sort of like a bigger deal. And like they typically have bigger effects. So like this one in multiplayer could be very good. So like mercenaries cannot be bribed or bought off by other players, which could be pretty a pretty big deal if just like the moment before a battle where you're reinforcing with mercenaries, they buy them all. Like that could be like a pretty big play, and this could prevent that from happening. So that could be very useful. As well as it gives these other passive bonuses. This one's pretty cool. Children of like deified characters can then get +1 to all their stats, which is pretty cool. And then this one, I never like I barely ever notice when a character is like a secret gambler or in debt. But this could save you from a civil war because you'd just be allowed to imprison them for that, and you wouldn't even get tyranny or even a penalty to popularity, which is pretty good. Corrupt is definitely something that you see a bit more often. So that I think is this could save you from in a pinch potentially. Probably not the strongest one though, still, but like these other ones are a bit cooler, I think. Let's see. Then I think in some of the dev comments they just mention in these screens you're able to now zoom in and out to like maybe pan over the whole tree or like look at a certain part of it, and I believe that applies to the missions UI as well. And yeah, so let's in one of our Arheo's comments, if we go to show dev responses, Arheo just mentions that you do have, because they didn't say it directly in the dev diary, but you will need to integrate a pop of the let's see, of the culture group that you're trying to go into for the military traditions. Yeah, it's somewhere in here. I don't know. Anyway, moving on to the next one, we go back to the sort of UI side of things. Again, this is very like it's just a better user experience and whatnot, and they've been taking a lot of constructive feedback specifically on the UI, which is it's always appreciative to like it just feels good when you just see the developers actively listening to things and addressing them. So yeah, we'll just glance over some of the UI. There's not really any like mechanical things, so I don't feel like there's as much to talk about as there is to look at. So yeah, a lot more artwork as well in the game, which is nice to see. Yeah, and these are like for holy sites, so they'll be a lot smaller than this, but yeah. And yeah, the UI is just looking so much better, and in fact, the UI looks so much better in the screenshots and stuff. I feel like a little demotivated to play the game currently, just because it looks so much nicer. Then this is the dev diary on levies. This is one of the biggest changes, maybe the biggest change in the entire update coming. And so, like how the levy system is going to work is you're not really going to have standing armies at the beginning of the game. They do point out that like a few nations will, but those will be like the Antagonids, the Seleucids, whatnot. Big empires that can afford a professional standing army. Okay, and also this is all like work in progress stuff. The UI anyway. So how levies are going to work is, I guess you could equate them a little bit to Crusader Kings, where your army's standing down by default, and then you press a button somewhere that'll raise the levies, and you'll have one button to raise them all. And the levies are broken up on a region level, so think of like each of your governors will have the levy for that governorship. And what's interesting to note about this is that your governors will be the general of that levy. Okay, so this means when you're choosing a governor, you need to both consider your finesse and your martial, which I think is just that is a little bit more of an interesting choice, because like now, Magna Graecia has like 23 levies now, so like when you're making the decision of who to put there, like do you go for someone who can who has higher finesse so that you get more money out of that area, or maybe is it more useful to have someone with a good martial? Because if you're fighting someone who does have a good martial governor or ruler, because your ruler is the governor of your capital region, you really just need to consider it. Now it's a little bit more of a balancing act, and I think it just makes the choice a little bit more interesting. So now you don't just look at, all right, who has the highest finesse and not too much corruption. So now you have to look at like some more things, and I think just you need to make a choice. Like, do we want good generals, or do we want better governors? Do we want maybe someone who's in the middle of both but not great at either? Just making more interesting choices. And if you find a character with good on both, that's probably going to be a bit more of a memorable character, I think. So other things to note about the levy system is that while they are raised, so like sort of each levy, or like maybe there's some kind of modifier or something, but the pops are sort of connected to the troops. And so when your troops are raised, those pops are not producing taxes, manpower, or research. Okay? And so raising your army, or raising your levy, doesn't cost you maintenance, but it does cost you tax income. So that is definitely a very interesting change to just the whole balance of the game, I think. Because like maybe the armies cost about the same amount of money. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. But while your army is raised, you're gaining less manpower and less research points. So like now, like peacetime is definitely going to be much more important to build up. And what this also means is like if you're a big empire, like say Rome, right? You don't want to raise all of your levies. You want to raise as few levies as you can to keep your income, manpower, and research high. So what's really cool about that, I think, is that like sometimes in wars and whatnot, you're going to be trying to like commit as little as possible while still winning, which I just think is like that's probably more fun, isn't it? Because like now you're almost like it feels like you're kneecapping yourself, but in a way where it's like you're only kneecapping yourself militarily, not economically, and it's like an interesting little trade off there, and it may I think it rewards like good like military play. Because if you can win a war with fewer troops, that there's a very good economic incentive now, as opposed to just you lose more troops and well you lose some more manpower. I think this is a much more interesting sort of system there. Um, let's see. So another very important part about the levies is that they are based on the culture and the class of your pops. So Roman freemen maybe give light infantry and maybe some light cav, whereas like Roman citizens and nobles might give you heavy infantry. Okay, and then like potentially like Scythian troops will give you horse archers and maybe heavy cav and stuff. Barbarians, I think they mentioned somewhere that like barbarian nobles might give you chariots or something. And what's important about this is only integrated culture pops will contribute to levies, which makes sense kind of because like if you're the Romans and you conquer the Gauls, you don't immediately let all of the Gauls join your army because you're worried about you don't want to equip them with weapons and whatnot and give them military training because then they're more likely to revolt. You're only going to let the people you trust serve in the military, which like from an immersion standpoint is really cool, but it also really makes it so that like assimilation becomes very important, and as well as promoting pops to citizens and nobles becomes more beneficial, as well as just integrating more pops. And I think what is going to be really interesting about this is the Diadochi start, because so like as Rome, I think just about 100. I mean, I think you have a few Hebrew pops that are like in diaspora in your land, but pretty much all of your pops are Roman. There's some, I think, civilian down like in around this area. I don't know if they'll be raised since they're in the same culture group. Probably not actually, but they do convert quicker. But anyway, the main point I'm trying to make there is just that like at the start, almost 100% of your pops are going to be contributing to your military. But as you conquer more and more land, your military is not going to be growing as quickly as your borders do, which I just think that's like Rome has, in terms of levies, like how many are here? There's like 60, over 60. So they have maybe 90 units there. And remember, they're like they're each 500 now, not 1,000. So like Rome right now has like 90 troops. Maybe if they conquer all of Italy, because they're not all integrated, maybe that puts them at 120 instead of like doubling or tripling or whatever that number. So it makes it so that like I think it's going to slow down snowballing a lot, and I think the Diadochi starts are going to be a lot more interesting because you have so few, like compared to your total size, Macedonian pops, and like if you're like the Seleucids or the Antagonids, in order to win that early war, maybe you integrate like a few more, pops into your accepted, like citizens, whatever, and that maybe that gives you the edge, and I think like that's going to be a much more weighty decision, because like if you imagine like the Seleucids, their governorships out like say in Persia are probably going to have very few levies from them, which is definitely like that's just an interesting trade-off because like then when the Marians come, unless you maybe integrate some pops, your troops out there are probably not going to be able to keep back the Marians, so that's pretty cool, I think. And then other things that'll affect the levy size are your laws. So the general balancing for the laws are, I think, like the top ones are all about levies, and the bottom ones are about legions, which we will talk about later. And so like it seems and these two, so the line here for republics is going to be a little bit different to the one for monarchies. Generally the balancing is going to be that levies get a higher number of levies per pop, and monarchies get access to legions more easily because it makes sense that they'd be able to raise their own personal like guard kind of a little bit more easily than you would in a republic. And so these are generally going to be tied to inventions. So, like you'll need to get to a certain point in technology to maybe unlock the legions. So, like maybe you want to beeline the legions as soon as possible, or maybe someone at the meantime is just gunning down like bonuses to their different troops. Another thing to note is that so because your culture group sort of determines like what troops you have. So, like I imagine these are I think the Seleucids start out with Persian integrated, but not all the other Iranian groups. But like for this one, for instance, there's probably more like cavalry or something, or maybe archers associated with Persian. Those were usually their go-to things, the archers and the heavy cav. And then later on, with the introduction of the Parthians, they adopted like horse archers and whatnot. Also, something they noticed, they mentioned that like an Etruscan levy is actually going to be different from a Roman one, so it might not just be culture group; it might also just be specific cultures. So that's kind of interesting. So, like for instance, Parthian might be different from Persian, and maybe Parthian has more horse archers, whereas Persian has more archers or heavy cav or something. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. They also just point out, like, so it's going to be the citizens and noble get you your better troops, and your freemen and tribesmen get you your lower tier troops, I guess, for your levy types. Okay. And a sort of a design thing is also that, like, so Greek traditions are generally going to buff the troops you get from Greek levies, and Persian ones for Persian ones, and so on and so forth. So if you're, say, the Seleucids, it becomes a lot more enticing to adopt the Persian traditions because so much of your army is going to be made up of Persian troops who you'll then want to get the bonuses for those troops for. So, like, yeah, these are just like I think the decision-making process is going to be so much more interesting in the next update. And something I only just noticed is that, like, here we see that like this tradition only costs 60 military experience as opposed to 100 as it is in the base game. So that's actually pretty interesting. And here we see some of those like one-time effects, like this adopting this will create 6 nobles, which is pretty cool. And let's see, I think that's just about everything. Oh yeah, there's some developer comments that shine a little bit. They just expand upon things as people are asking questions. Oh, and I didn't even get to tribes. Yeah, like this, like I said before, Trinchagulate, big meaty dev diaries. So yeah, I always like those. Anyway, so for a civilized country, your governor is going to be the commander of the levy. However, in a tribal country, you are going to have your clan chiefs split the levy. So let's say you're the Averni, okay, and you raise, your levies for your capital region. Then let's say that's like 30 levies. Then if you have 3 clan chiefs, they'll split that levy 3 ways. So each of the 3 clan chiefs would then control 10 of the levies. And that's sort of the default. However, you can still combine them together so that maybe they're all led by the guy with the best, martial skill or something. But the sort of trade-off there is that clan chiefs who are not in control of an army during war get a big loyalty penalty, which can, and it makes sense. They expect to be able to, lead some troops and whatnot. So that can irritate them, and what I'm about to say also applies to the governors. Because your governor or tribal leader will be commanding so many of your troops. At the end of the war, when you disband your troops, they will get a good number of loyal veterans, which increases their power base, which can be really, that can make it so that governors or tribe chiefs become a lot more influential, making it much more difficult to manage loyalty. Okay, and so like that's gonna make this whole like, you're probably gonna have to do a few more bribes here and there and stuff, early game, potentially because of that. However, if a tribe, I don't remember where it is, but it's somewhere in here. I think it's right in here somewhere. Clan chiefs in command of an army actually get a substantial loyalty bonus because you're letting them lead. However, of course, when the army stands down, they'll have all those loyal veterans. So then maybe after the war, they won't be as loyal. So yeah, it's definitely like a little bit more interesting on sort of the management level of the game. And then they mentioned that legions are going to be your sort of permanent armies, so you will still have permanent armies that you can fully choose like every troop for, but those will be expanded upon in another dev diary. Okay, so then the comments, one thing they noted that despite it being one of the most important things, is that if you like get stack wiped and a bunch of troops die, your pops can actually die too, which is like that adds so much more weight, and like you want to be a lot more careful with your armies now because it can have permanent lasting effects on your economy and stuff after that. So that can be really big. Okay. However, it is somewhere in here they say it's like a chance based thing. So if like you get like 100 levies just wiped, you're not necessarily going to lose 100 pops. Maybe for like, I don't know, maybe it's 10% or something. We don't know, and all that's subject to change. But yeah, it maybe you lose 100 levies, and maybe you lose like 10 pops. Like that you'll still feel that a little bit. And so that also makes so that like you can do a bit more economic damage to your enemy by just wiping their armies and stuff, which is pretty cool. Other things are that navies do work like they do before, because during this era, the state did typically control the navies. And navies weren't, they were mainly common in like Greece and for the Phoenicians, Carthaginians, whatnot. Outside of there wasn't as much use for the navies because, like, those areas, there's a lot more islands. The coast is a lot more important, involving trade and stuff. So protecting those types of, the islands and coastline was a lot more important for them in the Mediterranean. Also, they point out how your levies will come with like a number of supply trains and your donkeys. So maybe like for every 10 levies, you get a supply train or something. I don't know what the number will be, but yeah. Also, they mention here, and they show it at a later date, that you will have different unit models for your levies and your legions. And I think we might see some of those in the next dev diary. Okay, speaking of which, the next dev diary, another big fat juicy one, is for the legions. Okay, so how legions work is basically first you will need a law enabled that will allow you to control the legion, or to allow you to get a legion. So here's sort of like the main advantages of a legion are that it doesn't hurt your tax base and research and manpower. well, it'll cost manpower to recruit them, but it doesn't, lower the amount that the pops are producing each month. And that's obviously very, helpful. They will cost maintenance, and it's, generally it sounds like the legions are going to cost more than your levies in terms of like, so if having one, if having 10 levies raised gives you -1 taxes, having 10 units in a legion will probably cost more than $1. Right now in the game, a unit's usually between like 0.25 and like 0.6, 0.7 a month. So maybe it'll be the same, but I imagine it's probably been rebalanced quite a bit. Actually, right here we can see. So this is how many units is that? What, 13, I guess? So 13 units cost about $8. So yeah, that's definitely probably a lot more than the legions or the levies, because the levies, like all the levies raised in Rome was like what, -$2 or something. So yeah, that is a lot more expensive. However, it doesn't hurt your research, which is, that in particular very useful. And of course, you get to pick what troops are in your legion. Okay, so like half your army might not be light infantry. Instead, it might be all heavy infantry or something, which is a lot more advantageous, right? Okay. One thing I also thought about with this is and so we'll go into the laws in a little bit, but like one thing I've thought about is like, so this means you might not be able to do like your provincial sort of armies. So like in the current game, you can set a group of troops, like set an army to be provincial troops, and what that does is it lowers the unrest in the region, or the region that those troops are in, and the governor becomes the commander of them. But the main benefit of that was lowering unrest in different areas. So this means early game you might not have that option, which is that'll be I think we might see some more revolts and stuff in some of the bigger powers like the Seleucids, Marians, and whatnot, because I've always found that to be a very good way of maintaining your provincial loyalty. So now you might need to mess around a little bit more to make sure your provinces are staying loyal early game. But then maybe once you have legions, it might become a little easier. But now that I'm looking though, I don't actually see the option to do that. And I mean, it kind of makes sense since like the levies are troops. You can almost think of them like the province, army. But I don't see the button. Oh no, wait. Yeah, no, I don't see the button to make them a provincial army. Although you would need the commander gone, so maybe they hide the button if that's the case. But yeah, whatever. So, legions are sort of organized in a very similar way to the levies, where you will have a legion per region. Didn't mean to rhyme, but oh well. And so Macedon right here could only have a max of 2 legions because they only have areas in 2 different regions. And so for every troop that you make a legion, 1 fewer troop can be a levy. And so if Macedon has, say, 100 possible levies, then you can only have 100 possible legions. And if you make, say, 50 troops into legions, then your levy goes down to 50. Which is, a way to just make sure there is a limit on this. But yeah. But of course, like they also cost a lot of money, so there's another soft limit there too as well. And yeah, so yeah. Then we talk about sort of the laws and how they affect legions. So early game, you're only going to have legions, and basically it's just going to as you go down it, you'll unlock like I don't know what the first 2 are going to be, because the first 2 are about levies. But then the third one seems to be like it unlocks what you'll be able to have 1 legion in your capital. Okay, and then the final one is like it unlocks 1 legion in every single region. Okay, so you have that sort of progression there. Whereas for a monarchy, it's a little bit different in that there's 5, and let's see. and these will be like locked by tech as well as like great powers or like power levels. So like it doesn't say it on this one. You have to read into it, but basically like I think it's actually it's right here. Or whatever. But to get maybe the final law, you as a republic, you might need to be a great power or a major power in order to get that as well. So yeah. Whereas for monarchies, it's generally a little bit easier, but they again have a little bit lower numbers in terms of levies overall. Okay. Another really cool feature that this one's just kind of like for fun, for flavor, is that your legions will now have sort of like a history of them. It'll say things like who created the legion, any major battles, maybe any major sieges, if they sacked a holy site or something, and it just sort of keeps track of your your legions, which I think is it's going to be really good for like role playing and stuff. It helps you to keep track of like which army was it that did that cool thing, and yeah. So that's pretty cool. I like that addition. It's very, it's a nice little thing. And yeah. Then we have the honors and dishonors system. And I don't think they mention it here, but in, I think, the next Dev Diary, they cleared up that this is going to be coming in the other DLC that's going to be released that the main team has been working on. So you're going to have the Vitruvius Great Wonders DLC as well as the Heirs of Alexander DLC. And this is the honors and dishonors are going to be a feature in that DLC as well as some other stuff that we'll get to. And so what these honors and dishonors are is that as your army does things, so maybe like one of these events recorded in the history of the army, like after a big battle or something, they'll get an honor or a dishonor depending. So like if they sack a holy site or something, they might have a dishonor. And what these do is they give passive bonuses to the army as well as the commander. So like this one's pious. So whoever you make the general of this army will get a permanent +1 to their zeal, so long as they're the army leader. Which basically to me says like I definitely want my generals in command of some of these armies because like having a passive bonus to your general to your ruler sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good. And then like some of these honors are amazing. Like 10% morale is amazing. And also like a -5% chance to cohort loyalty gain. Like that's really good for preventing a single character from getting just a ridiculous power base early on. Which is just that's very helpful. For potentially preventing a civil war. So these definitely look like they're going to be pretty powerful. And they add like some character, to your different armies. So like if you have two armies that are identical in the types of troops, because you feel like I want exactly this many heavy infantry and this many cavalry and yada yada yada. Like they might actually, some of these might give bonuses to say elephants or cavalry or something. And like I think that's pretty cool. So like some of your armies will actually just have a different feel to them, which is pretty cool. And maybe you'll like build them differently because of that. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, and here they just talk about like some of the things you can do to gain them. Let's see. So like you can gain some honors by winning big battles, having triumphs for the commanders, or capturing important cities. Sorry about that. And dishonors can be gained from things like sacking holy sites, potentially looting. So if your general is in command of the army, then like when you siege down a city, you get the option to either like loot it and for how much. So like you can choose like like take everything and destroy everything, take all the money back or whatever, or do a gentle looting or whatever. So now maybe it's not always going to be worth taking the most amount of money, because you get a dishonor. So yeah. Okay. Some other things is that your army leader it's now called a legate, which is a little weird if you're not playing Rome, but whatever. And if they just did some localization stuff, that'd be a nice little thing. But yeah, and then you can have these secondary sort of generals called the tribunes. Okay, and so why would you have tribunes? What bonus do they have? Well, basically so anyone you make a tribune is counted as like employed, and that means like if you have an issue with scorned families, you could potentially make someone a legate, and that would solve that problem. Also, it makes it so that like if your general dies, then the like top legate will immediately become the general. So like if your general died and then like you immediately entered a battle at like just a really awkward time, um, you would have a general if you have a legate. Also, if you like split the army in half and whatnot, the legates will become the generals of the other portions of the army. Okay. So yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Also, something they add is right here is that when you disband your levies, it will create like you'll get a one-time bonus to your military experience, and this is because normally you get your passive military experience based on how well trained, how much experience your troops have on average, and because you're constantly raising and lowering your levies, you wouldn't really have that. As you wouldn't have they wouldn't amass experience, so you'd gain military experience a lot slower. So what they do is whenever you disband your levies, you gain an amount of military experience based on, I don't know if it's how much combat they saw or just what their experience is when you lower them. But yeah, this looks like a lot, um, especially if the military traditions are only like 60 each, because that would be like more than 4. So I imagine, and they say it somewhere that like all the numbers are subject to change. But yeah, let's see what else. Every government type will also have an office that directly boosts your military experience passively as well. So yeah, gonna be unlocking. You're still gonna have ways to gain military experience that are solid. Okay. Now we're moving on to the Heirs of Alexander DLC, and the scope of this, as you might guess from the name, is to focus mainly on the uh, the Diadochi, so Macedon, Thrace, Antigonids, Egypt, and the Seleucids. Okay, so what this DLC is going to sort of entail, and so I don't know if I'm imagining this DLC will be separate too, but maybe it'll be included with the Great Wonders. I don't know, but I imagine it's probably separate just based on how they've done the Dev Diaries. But anyway, some things that you might get in this is that you might get some custom Great Wonders for the Diadochi, as well as mission trees for all of them, as well as flavor events. And let's see what else. So the honors and dishonor system as well. New events, new music, and I really like the soundtrack to Imperator, so that I always like to hear. And yeah, and there's probably more that we'll go into, as we go on. So one of the biggest things also that all the Diadochi will get is this new war goal called the Legacy of Alexander, and what this does is it sort of reuses the Civil War mechanics, kind of, so that if you're the Seleucids and you declare war on the Antigonids with this war goal, when you occupy their land, it will immediately flip to you, as opposed to like you occupy it, you get war score, and then at the end of the war you ask for how much land you want. Instead, the land will just instantly go to you, and it will give you some like war exhaustion, so that way the wars reach a natural endpoint at some point. But what this does is like it means you can kind of go crazy. As the Diadochi, I think like your early wars, you can probably take a huge amount of land, and I imagine this is going to be like really big for like world conquest players who want to, because like if you can start as one of the Diadochi and just conquer all of the other ones like immediately, and of course like the limiting factor is going to be war exhaustion, because the higher your war exhaustion gets, I think you get more unhappiness and maybe loyalty penalty. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know. But definitely a happiness penalty, which means you're going to have a lot of revolts and stuff. So there's definitely going to be limiting factors to doing that, but people break these games too. They find a way. So this is definitely strong, but I think it's also just more fun. You know, it definitely probably going to make it so that if you want to, you can snowball super hard though. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think it'll make the early game a little bit more dynamic with the Diadochi as well. as well as some of the missions that we'll talk about in some of the other dev diaries. Man, this video keeps going. Where were we? Right. So in this dev diary, they also talk about some of the not really talk about. They just show you some of the unit model differences between Legion troops and levies. So these ones are for the Arabian group. Over here we have the Celtic group, so Levy Legion. You know, the cooler they are, that means they're the legions. You have the Greeks, got the Romans, so you get your Velites and Centurions. And they show some more off in another dev diary. Now the handoff to Snow Crystal, who's going to talk about the Seleucid mission trees. And so I'm going to try to go through the mission trees kind of quick because, like, I don't know, I did just reading through like what every mission, and they don't even do that. You know, they go through a few highlights, but still, you know, it's a bit much. You know, when you play, you know, you'll just go through the mission tree yourself, kind of. But I do want to just point out like some maybe the more interesting things on some of them. So the Seleucid mission tree, it's going to have 4 different missions. They're going to be focused on Babylon, Syria, Anatolia, and Palestine / Phoenicia. So some of them are going to be more focused on building up. One thing I thought was kind of interesting, you need to assimilate like a certain number of pops or make them integrated, you know, like accepted cultures. So, you know, that's an interesting little idea. Yeah. There's another thing that they have where there's like you can get an influx of like Greek colonists. So like, yeah, I mean you can gain, and like these pops come from places in Greece, and you'll compensate them for that or something with like, you know, this money will be split up in political influence, and that'll go to the people you get these colonists from back in Greece. And you know, that's kind of neat. That's kind of cool little thing there. But yeah, and yeah, the general trend of these missions is just like conquer the region, do some things to stabilize it, and you know, build it up a little bit, and you know, maybe unlock some deities here and there, things like that. You know, it's neat. It's okay. I don't typically get like too overly excited about the mission trees personally, but you know, like whenever one of these DLCs or whatever comes out, I still like playing one of the ones that get some of the new mission trees because they get a little bit more light shown on them. So next we have a dev diary talking about the Egyptian mission tree. And so they get 4 missions as well. One focused on expansion to Palestine and Phoenicia, one focused around the Red Sea and Kush and Cyrenaica, and one focused around Egypt itself, building it up. They do some things really like you can syncretize some gods where you like create some new deities that are like a combination of like some Greek and Egyptian ones, which is pretty cool. As well as one focused around becoming a naval power. Okay, so those are just the main things there. Yeah, you can go through this if you want to really see some of the more detail oriented stuff. But yeah, we're gonna move on to the next thing. So the next one we have a little bit of like a little bit on ports as well as the Thrace mission tree, and the Thrace mission tree is really cool, in my opinion anyway. So the ports, basically ports are going to work a bit like forts, rhyming a lot today. But you basically, well, they're not quite like the same, but basically, you can build ports anywhere now, which is pretty cool. I think that's a neat little thing. So now it's not just like the pre-seeded ports. If you want to build a port somewhere, you can make that a cool port city of some kind. And so it's now an actual like building. And what's interesting about ports is that the higher level your port, you'll stack the bonus like you would for any other building, but it will also allow you to recruit better ships from that province. So like if you want to get also just some UI changes to the invention screen, making it look a little more mathematical, I guess. I don't know. That's my word, right? And you can also search for like specific like modifiers or bonuses and stuff, which is pretty interesting. That's just a helpful little thing that maybe gets you an idea of which way you want to go down the trees. But basically, like if you want to get like the mega polyremes, you might need a military tradition, as well as like a level 5 port. Okay, and like like you might need a level 4 for the Hexareem and whatnot for all the other ones. Okay, so yeah, that kind of goes over all the big things for the ports and the few little invention changes there. And yeah, oh, one thing they also mentioned is that the average time for getting in a tech is now about 15 years as opposed to 20 years. That way you can get a few more inventions because it just speeds up your sort of progression through these trees, and there are so many more inventions that you're still not going to be able to get every single one of them in a playthrough unless people find a way, which they might. So we'll see. And now we have Branton, also known as Dreykus, to talk about the Thrace focus tree. And this one I think is really cool. He used to work on Hearts of Iron 4, so maybe some of his insights into some of their focus trees is sort of blossomed into what we get in this Thrace mission tree. And so he talks about the Chad that is Lysimachus, and then going over the start condition changes to Thrace, where now instead of owning most of this territory directly, it's broken up into I think mostly Greek city-states. Well, not some of these are more, they have like 2 provinces or settlements, and some of them might be like Dacian. But now all these are like subjects of you. So I don't. Did they say? I think he said they're Greek colonies, so maybe not feudatories or whatever. So I imagine they don't take up a relationship slot, but maybe they give you money instead of you know manpower on like a feudatory or something else maybe. And let's see. I think he actually made bullet points for me here, so I get to be a little lazy. So it's got 3 mission trees. And this one is comprised of like keeping loyalty of the Odrysian kingdom and its king, achieving submission from the remaining tribes south of the Danube. So basically dealing with the Thracians / Dacians. One thing that's kind of cool that like it encourages you to like build forts on the river crossings, which that just makes a lot of sense to do anyway. And it also has some things in here for like some events that are like about Thracian raids and whatnot from across the river. And then you have a mission about obtaining the support of the Greeks. So these are like all your subjects here. And so this is basically like these colonies are going to be rather disloyal, it sounds like. I don't know if it's going to be like some kind of modifier or if it's maybe because they're Greek colonies they get a disloyalty penalty or something. But there's going to be events in here about like them trying to rebel and you just sort of stamping down on them, either being a little bit more lenient at first or like actually like putting the boot down, kind of. Okay. And one thing that's really cool about this, and so like if you're at war with the Antagonids can actually like I think it's like an event where they can incite the Greek colonies to all like revolt against you, which is like that's a cool little like it adds a bit more like management and like challenge to Thrace's start. Whereas like I don't know, a lot of mission trees focus about like you getting stronger and like building you up, which is it's fun and satisfying, but like this one just creates problems for you kind of, and I just think like gameplay wise that just sounds like a lot more fun. And yes, I like but because of that I just think like it adds this new interesting dynamic to Thrace's start, which makes it pretty cool. Okay. And then they have some stuff about like going in and beating up the Antagonids, and as well as I believe one of the things was making a sort of this Philhellenic policy gives you the opportunity to like you send some money and like you basically patronize the Greeks back in Greece itself, and you try to like set up a league, which you can then create as like a feudatory. And I think it's the same feudatory that we're going to see in a future dev diary. And yeah, and it also deals with like fighting the Antagonids as well as I believe some little bit about Macedon. The matter of Macedon. So yeah, Thrace's mission tree seems like really cool. However, like I think it immediately got one upped by the absolute chungus of a dev diary that this was. Which let's just keep scrolling because we can, and it just keeps going. And yeah, it's about the Antagonids. But before we get to the just keep going. All right. Before we get to the Antagonids, we get a little bit of a I don't know, a new showcase of a little extra button here called the Anoint button. So like if you're a monarchy now, um, you'll be able to actually choose your successor. So if you like your second son because he's got better martial than the first or something, you can spend a bit of political influence and a fairly hefty amount of legitimacy to basically make it so that that's your chosen successor, and that'll make it so that they are a lot more. They'll almost certainly, if not certainly, become the next king. So that's nice instead of having to do the sort of convoluted workaround, which was sending like people off as mercenaries and whatnot, um, which was kind of goofy, but also like is a way around it. Another thing that they're adding is the elective monarchy succession type. So as a monarchy, you can switch your instead of like going from like it's like agnatic, cognatic, and yada yada. Another option will be the elective monarchy, where in this one, uh, every character in your country gets a vote as to who will become the next king or queen. Um, and so with this, it makes it so that like one of the main benefits of this government type is that the pretenders do not get a loyalty penalty because they're sort of rightfully being elected and whatnot. So if you see like one character like befriending a lot of characters and maybe getting some more votes, that's kind of cool there. And you will also be able to still anoint this, but the way I'm thinking this works is it's probably just like worth like one vote, or maybe your vote is worth a little bit more or something. But yeah, this is pretty cool. And so you're more likely to get some older rulers, but with maybe better stats, because that's one of the things that people base their elections off of. So yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. And here they also show out some more levies and legions. So I think the Iberian ones look sick. Like that legion just looks so cool to me. And then we have Chop Mist is just writing a book here about the Antagonids, but at least it's a very interesting book. So the Antagonids are going to get like 3 mission trees, and they're beefy. So one of them is it's called Antagonist's Vision. This is all about just sort of building up, and solidifying your holdings at the start. So like Syria and maybe Anatolia. They get sort of the colony thing. It looks like that the Seleucids have. I think I don't know if this is like the exact same thing, but there's some colony stuff that you can do there. And yeah, there's basically it's just sort of solidifying the provinces and whatnot that you start with. However, if you might already know, but if the Antagonids are unable to capture Corinth before Antigonus dies, it's historically it's seen as like this the waning of their control, and the satraps and whatnot sort of all like break up and they lose most of their control there. And so that is still something that can happen. If you do not take Corinth before Antigonus dies, you will get this event, the Antigonid cause waivers right here. And this will give you 3 options. And these 3 options massively will dictate sort of the rest of your campaign. Okay? So the first path is the sort of historical path. This is what Demetrius went and did. Basically, the satrapies in Anatolia sort of defect over to Thrace and Syria and like the Palestine area sort of flipped Egypt and the Seleucids. And all you are left with as the Antagonids is Cyprus, your few little holdings in Greece, and like I believe it's like Tyre and the area around Tyre. So like, and you do get a big temporary bonus as you like. I guess you took the money or whatever. So like you get this sort of temporary bonus to like your legions and levies and whatnot, which gives you an opportunity to do what Demetrius historically did was and go and kick Macedon out of go and kick Cassander out of Macedon and take over Macedon yourself which Demetrius sort of set up the dynasty that was ruling Macedon all the way until the Romans eventually deposed them. So, from your base of operations, sort of like in Cyprus and these few little places in Greece, you set up like a really cool like comeback story for yourself, which just and it's all historical. It seems really cool to me, as well as I think some of these will become satrapies of Thrace. I don't know if I imagine they'll be somewhat disloyal. I'm not really sure. If they do become satrapies, I'm not fully sure. But yeah, but one thing you do know, like despite how weak you look here as the Antagonids, you do keep your vassals. So like Athens will still be a feudatory unless they do that mission that they just say we're not your feudatory anymore. You'll suck a lemon. As well as Aeolia and Ionia. Those are two pretty good sized nations that will still be your vassals. However, now that you're a lot weaker, it might be a little bit harder to keep them loyal. So definitely probably want to spend some political influence at the beginning, improving their relations. And so the other option will be you basically give up your Greek holdings and a bit of this territory over here in order to keep your sort of kingdom in Syria and part of Anatolia. So basically, it's like you either choose like the west or the east, like which part of your empire do you want to maintain control over. Okay. And then the final option is that you can actually just tag switch to Pergamon, and Pergamon will become kind of seedy. Is there better? No, it doesn't look like there's a better picture. Basically, you'll pop out in this area as the I think Adalid family, and so Pergamon historically was a very a big ally of the Romans when they were fighting the Seleucids specifically, and yeah, they're just it's a pretty a somewhat important historical Greek state at this time. So you can play as them if you'd like. They also point out that Mithridates will now have like a sort of a event chain, so that whereas either as Chios or as Pontus, you'll be able to play as Mithridatic Pontus, and that dynasty was the Mithridates that like Caesar fought. So yeah, just some really cool like historical scenarios kind of get set up by this one, so that you can reenact some different things, which is pretty cool. That should be really fun, I think. So then one of the other two mission trees outside of the initial one is the Macedonian Aspirations one, which is all about just like taking over Macedon, kicking the Antipatrids out, and yeah, just establishing yourself in Greece. Okay. You also have like an opportunity to have like a diplomatic marriage between you and the Seleucids, which is one thing. And I think does he give you? No, I thought there was something that maybe gave you elephants, but maybe I'm thinking of something else or something. I don't know. You have one thing that turns a place into a city. There's like so with this sort of a civil war type of event chain kind of that happens in Macedon at the beginning of the game, and like with this you might actually be able to sort of get involved there, where you sort of take over, I believe, the Thessaly portion of the civil war, and then you can go in there and claim take over the rest of Macedon. And yeah, and then the final one is the Antigonid Birthright mission tree, which is it looks like it's going to be all about like taking over, retaking the area that you lost. Which I'm not I would need to look through this again, but I don't know if you're able to take this mission if you stay east, but I think you can probably take it. But most of these missions will probably be either completed or just a lot quicker to complete. Like Satrap of Phrygia. Well, if you already own Phrygia, probably not much to do there. But yeah. And this also means like if you have lost Ionia or Aeolia, you can get them back as feudatories. And yeah, things like that. So reestablishing yourself in like Syria and whatnot. I think you'll have the opportunity to choose to make your capital like go back east or something. Get a nickname, and yeah. It just seems like a really cool historical mission that goes like from big boy to small boy, and then build back up to big boy, which is pretty cool. Also, another little thing they noted somewhere in here was that if you take over Macedon, just like Epirus and other countries, um, you can you can then form the tag Macedon if it's gone. So, like if Macedon gets completely wiped out by you, you can then become Macedon, and it sounds like you'll be able to choose whether or not you remain blue or yellow, and if your name will be the Antigone Kingdom or if you become Macedon. So yeah, um, this is just like the coolest mission tree I think we've ever seen for Imperator by a long shot. It's just there's so much cool stuff, and I mean they had a lot of like history to pull from to make it so. So that's just like I don't know, it's just really cool. It's just there's so many like moving pieces. It feels like with it. It's just really cool. The next dev diary is about civilization value, buildings, as well as the Mastodon mission trees. So basically, just some balance changes. Basically, civilization value is now going to be a lot of it. Like one of the main bonuses civilization value is now going to give is now it's going to give you a bonus to your pop output. So 34 civilization value gives you plus 34% pop output, which is a pretty healthy bonus. Like that's a pretty meaty sort of a just bonus there. Sorry for that interruption. So yeah, civilization value gives you population output, and things like buildings will now where do we go? So before I go to the buildings, so the base population output looks like it's going to be 30 minus 30%. So when you're below 30 civilization value, you'll actually be sort of weaker than you normally would have been beforehand. And once you get above that, you sort of break even and you start getting an actual like positive bonus to your population output. Okay. Other things like if the dominant culture is not an integrated culture, just like before, you have a penalty to population output, as well as if it's a settlement, you now get a penalty to population output. So like getting these bonuses to population output now, like they become a bit more becomes a bit more important, I suppose, which is neat. Just it's change. I don't know if it's good or bad yet. But you can also raise your civilization cap with buildings. So every building just about gives a percentage increase to your civilization cap. And obviously now that becomes a lot more beneficial because the more civilization output, the more pop output, which is pretty just beneficial, just ways to stack buffs. And what I like about this is the areas you choose to develop and like build this infrastructure in actually become better. That's I like that change personally. And then so some changes to buildings. Generally, the main change that they're talking about here is that the top line past like this point, I think. So like these four, I think. Yes. So these four are going to be your unlimited buildings. You can build as many of these as you want, just like you did before. Okay. Just as long as you have enough building slots for them. And the bottom line are going to be buildings that are all limited in some capacity. So, and there's a new building called Earthworks, which we'll talk about in a sec. But like each of these buildings, you can have like you're limited to one of these in any given territory, or you're limited to like 3 of them. And I don't. Some of these maybe you can increase this cap with some inventions or something. I don't know yet. And yeah, so the what's cool about this is like these buildings are way stronger. So like the foundry now is like probably the best building because it gives you 5% civ value, 50% starting experience, which is kind of useful. It's like I don't know. I don't think that's the biggest of deals, but like another 10% on pop output, like that is really good. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of like giving you 15% civ value. Although if you're at 100% already, then that getting the pop output would be better than civ value. But yeah, then great temples now they give you the 5% civ value. They give you 10% state religion happiness, which is pretty big for one building. And the cost for these buildings, I would imagine, is probably higher than like the unlimited ones. And they give your pop conversion speed like normal. And yeah, and then you get to your sort of the ones that affect your pop ratios, which are now limited to 3. So you can't just only spam academies indefinitely to get like 90% nobles. But I don't. I don't think anyone even got up to 90% because that would be like, God, you would need like, because I think like the base would start with like 90 points and the other one, so you'd need to have like, oh my God, you need so many points. You need so many academies for that. But anyway, it is limited now, so you don't just spam the one build. You'll probably spam 3 of these and then actually think about, what other things should I build and in what order and whatnot now. Although now I think the go-to like first option is the Foundry, because like this is just so much better. Because 10% pop output, it gives you 10% bonus on all of your existing nobles and citizens and money, and I think that's amazing. So yeah, and I think this visually just shows you like there's a check mark when it's capped. So yeah. And then another thing they highlight. Oh, let me go back to the Earthworks for a second. So the Earthworks is kind of a weird building. It gives you minus 10% pop capacity, which is bad. That's just that's a penalty. And then you do get minus 3 combat within the territory though. So what this is useful for is like if you have any important forts that are a city, you can build some earthworks in there, or actually you can build 1 earthworks in there. And this might be like something you can increase with an invention somewhere, something maybe. But yeah, and it mainly like reducing the combat with it makes it so that it's easier to hold when you have less numbers but higher quality generally. And so it just mitigates the advantage that other people will have of outnumbering you. And it's obviously most beneficial in places like mountains. And I think a lot of people are fixated on like, but why? I don't want to build this in a city unless it's like a mountain, and like I don't want to build a mountain city because that's not a good spot for a city. But you can still build it in like places that are like hills or road with like hills that have like a river crossing or even a straight crossing. Like I think on the Bosphorus this might actually not be too bad. Especially like Byzantion's a forest as well as the straight crossing, so like you can still get like a minus like I think 3 there. So like that's still pretty good. It's definitely it's definitely going to be a very niche building. And I probably won't build it very much, but like it could have its some real situations where it does shine a bit. And then the final thing that they highlight here before going into the Macedon mission tree is there's going to be some mutually exclusive tech. So like if you take this tech, you cannot take this tech, which again incentivizes all that decision making and choosing like which way you want to go with your country. And so this one's just focused on like urban planning or rural planning. So one that gives you bonuses to your cities and one that gives you bonus to your settlements. And so at first glance, it looks just like the urban one. Sounds amazing, like cheaper build cost everywhere, population capacity plus 5% everywhere. Cities gain 2 extra building slots is great. Pop promotion speed going up, that's nice. And global food modifier, that's also pretty damn nice. And all this gets is like 1 extra building slot for settlements, which you might be like, oh, that's terrible. But then, you think about it a little bit more, it's like, well, then you could build like, your farming settlement or mine, and also either a barracks or a slave estate, or, a fort, and then the other economic building. Like, this is almost going to, almost, because of course your cities won't, but like, it's almost going to double the number of buildings you can have, which can have like some really strong effects on your economy. Like if you just spam like slave estates in like every settlement in the current version of the game, that gives you like some slave settlements can give you like 0.1 extra like it's not ducat but like gold, I guess, a month. And like that's really big. Like that building pays itself back like fairly quickly. And like it's fairly strong. I don't know which one. Like I still feel like this is probably a bit stronger, but I do think this one maybe a little slept on, maybe a smidge. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like the more I do think about it, like because city building slots, that's nice. This is nice. It's like these are all nice, but they're not incredible. The pop capacity is pretty good though. And one thing I did want to touch on that was important is that the aqueduct, which is currently the most busted building in the game, it is not limited, so you can still spam aqueducts. However, in some of the comments, they've basically said that like it doesn't see. So the reason why aqueducts are busted is because if you have 150% pop capacity modifiers, because the aqueduct base game, I don't know if they've changed it in the update, but gives, and I think it is the same, but it gives you +4 to your pop capacity. So in this city, we have 62 pop capacity. So you build an aqueduct, you imagine that goes up to 66, okay? But that 4 gets multiplied by any pop capacity modifiers. And once you're at 150%, that 4 becomes +10, okay? So that would bring this up to 72. And the thing is, every 10 pops gives you an extra building slot. So at that point, each aqueduct gives you 10 pop capacity, and 10 pops gives you a new building slot, which means you can just keep building more and more aqueducts. And because of that, you can get cities that basically have unlimited pops in them. Like you'll see some screenshots every now and then of people with like, yeah, I fit 7,000 pops into this one city. And because you have so many other buildings of things like libraries and whatnot that boost like mainly like academies, they'd give like +7.5% bonus to your research points. And because of that, if you have, +7.5% of a bonus onto, a normal like 50 pop city, that gives you some amount. But like 7.5% on 7,000 pops is a lot. It's a lot more than is supposed to be possible. And you can do that same thing with tax buildings. They give you 10% more taxes. And 10% on top of 7,000 pops becomes insane. And so like the mega cities, as they're called, were just like a massive sort of like most. I feel like the average player didn't bother, like, because the average player didn't think about it or like do it that way. But you could make it so that you could have like maximum research efficiency just off of your capital, and an insane income with insane manpower and all this just off of one city. And it was kind of immersion breaking and not very good. So the main thing that they said, like, aqueducts are unlimited. However, because of changes made to the pop capacity modifiers, you really should not be able to get 150% bonus. Okay? So you can still spam aqueducts. It's just that you won't get enough pop capacity for the aqueduct to sort of pay itself off indefinitely. So that's a really good balance change, I think, for the meta, at least. Now, whether there's still going to be some way to maybe, find some combination of modifiers and things that gets you that 150%, I don't know. So, the dev said, like, even with, like, cheating, he couldn't get a city over 300 pops. So, I don't know. Maybe it's fixed. I don't know. It's hard to say. But yeah. Then we go into the Mastodon mission tree. And so there's 3 mission trees, and so the first mission tree is focused on like securing Greece against the Antagonids. So yeah, all about securing Greece, and then you set up sort of like a feudatory in the League of Corinth, which is objectively not as strong as it would be to just make all of the cities, states, like their own feudatories, because like it's just a lot stronger to have like a swarm than it is to have like this guy would have like one levy army, and it would be a good sized levy army, but all the city states combined would have been probably stronger. That they'd all get bonuses to like their capital province, and they'd all have 100% just about correct culture pops and whatnot, and the general efficiency of each of the city states would have been a lot higher than as a single one. But this is a lot nicer on the map, so who can really say which one's better, Yeah. So that's basically the first mission tree, and then the second 2 mission trees, any nation that forms Macedon will also have access to. So if the antagonists form Macedon, they will also be able to get access to these missions. And Macedon, of course, will have these missions as well. So the first one's called Hellenic Mastery, and so this one is, I think this one might actually be with the League of Corinth. What is it? So first one's about securing the border against the Antagonids and securing Greece. This one focuses on becoming the hegemon of the Greek world, as well as building up Macedon and attracting talented characters and unlocking some new deities. Okay, so yeah, you get some deities, and it's about you try to like make Macedon like maybe like Pella just as good as like Athens, kind of. Okay, and then the last mission tree is focused around like sort of taking control of the Adriatic, so like Illyria and maybe Italy as well. Yeah, Italian coast and stuff. So putting you into conflict with the Romans, maybe doing some making it so that the Macedonian wars go a different way. And yeah. And one thing that's like one cool little mission here is you get to like pick like a city to be founded on in Illyria, so you could like choose either Epidamnos or Apollonia. And it'll automatically build a road between there and Pella, which is kind of neat, and also gets a port. And yeah, that's a cool little mission. I like roads, so I fully support this decision. Yeah, I mean it's not as involved as like the Antagonid ones, but I mean that's a hard bar to clear. So then we get to the final and most recent dev diary. Finally, at the end of the marathon here, kind of. It's just talking about some balance changes and one final mission for all the Diadochi. So, I'm hoping also like because it sounds like they've finished talking about the DLC, so maybe next week for the dev diary they tell us the release date. Who knows? I don't know. But I hope so, because I am dying to play with this update already. It looks so good. So this is just talking about some of the balance changes. Basically, for manpower, your max manpower is about the same, but they're making it so that you get your monthly manpower basically goes up, but your max manpower is about the same. Okay. And so this was a change just because your levies typically are a bit larger than your armies are in the current game, so you needed that extra manpower sort of to keep that like normal sort of feel. Okay. So yeah, statesmanship is also now a bigger factor in determining who will become the next consul or archon or whatever in a republic. So the next leader of your republic. They're going to consider your statesmanship a little bit more instead of prominence. So if you want to manipulate who becomes the next, ruler in a republic, good move is going to be put them in an office that gives them a lot of statesmanship. Okay. Yeah. So what I like to do is I like to making like a character a general, and then they get a lot of popularity and stuff from being the general. And I don't think that being a general increases your statesmanship. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it does. So I'm wondering, like, if it's still, what's better? Is it better to be a general and get a lot of popularity, or is it better to have a lot of, statesmanship from leading, working in an office for a long time? I don't know which one's better. But yeah, it's something to consider if you're trying to politic a character into a position of power. Yeah. And then we have subject integration. Basically, it's just quicker. Because if you've ever tried, I know specifically, if you've ever tried to integrate Bactria, because integration speed is based on the like pop numbers. So like if Bactria has 500 pops or whatever, that 500 pops determines like how long it's going to take to integrate them. But because they're so big, their pop like maybe every year they gain like 5 extra pops. Because of the rate of their pop growth, it could potentially be faster than you could integrate them, meaning you would never integrate them potentially, or it would just take an insane amount of time. So they've just made it so that that's a lot quicker. Yeah. As well as some new subject types are being added, such as the League City, which it sounds like it's like a feudatory but it maybe gives you trade instead. I don't know. Well, it might not be like a feudatory because maybe it takes a Diplo slot. So I don't know. Also, the Syracusan mercenary state, said mission too many times. That is now something any country can unlock through the innovation tree. However, Syracuse will still start out with the ability to do them so long as you have the Magna Graecia content pack. So yeah. Then for oratory inventions, they added some keystone style effects, such as this one. You get an instant 50 political influence, and what this one's really cool, I think, is if you guarantee any nation that is 12 territories or smaller, you have a chance that they will offer to become your subject, and that chance is based on your ruler's charisma. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a very interesting little thing there. This one, it looks like this unlocks maybe a law called reduced intervention restriction, or maybe it has something to do with Casus Belli's or something. I don't know. It's got the time to fabricate claims icon there, but that doesn't necessarily mean, that's what that does. It might just, I don't know. It probably just unlocks a law that does something to do with war goals or fabricating claims or something. I don't know. Yeah. Then they've just said like they've reskilled mercenaries to fit the game, the changes better in terms of sizes. You can take your sacred treasures out of holy sites that are not in your pantheon, which is just sort of like a quality of life thing. If you have a holy site, it will actually change so like right here, normally you'll see it'll look like either a city or a settlement based on what the territory is. But if it's a holy site, it'll have a little holy site icon. Just neat, Next, they talk about some AI changes. So nothing specific, just saying that. Well, yeah, a little specific. That's saying that AI will typically now, when it's choosing like who to attack, they're going to value more developed land as opposed to just tribal land. And in some other screenshots that we're going to see on Arheo's, the game director's Twitter, I think we'll see a few other things about that. And it makes it so that things expand a bit more generally in line with how Rome did. So like Rome is now less likely to just go into Germany because it's all a bunch of weak small states, and it just looks hideous on the map. Now Rome is more likely to go for like Greece, Carthage, and the coast of Iberia and stuff I've seen, because there's some cities along here, and it looks a lot better, I think. At least in what we've seen, and in here they just say like this also shows that like the Etruscans can form a new tag called Tuscia, I don't know, and they managed to make Rome a client, which is just hilarious. And then Chopmiss talks about the final sort of mission tree in the Heirs of Alexander, where any successor who becomes the big Mac Daddy of the other Diadochi gets access to this. And what this mission tree is focused on is it sounds like the right side is about reconquer everything that Alexander did, reunite the empire. And then this is sort of like based on, it looks like some administration type of stuff. And you can make like a satrapy of Mesopotamia is one thing. So Mesopotamia be released as satrapy for that from one of these missions. And some other stuff about build up. You can they made it so you can combine a few sacred treasures into like some like super omni mega polymerization fusion summon ass looking sacred treasures that are absolutely ludicrous. But I don't mind that too much, just because if you've already conquered that much land, you've already won anyway. So this is just sort of like your victory lap, I guess. And I think you can what was it? I think there's one it says something about like I think giving your heirs a permanent bonus or something. Yeah, the ruling dynasty gets extra skills in a chosen category. Yeah, that's cool. Again, it's just sort of like I think at this point you've already won like 10 times over. You're already by far the most powerful country. And this is just sort of like your victory lap. You just get to feel the power trip. Another thing is if you're not of the Argead dynasty, you'll now be called the Macedonian Empire instead of the Argead empire, Argead being Alexander the Great's dynasty. But yeah, and so it'll the sort of like it looks like the final step in the mission tree is probably going to be it might cause a civil war, and or it sounds like it will, maybe. I don't know if it's guaranteed to happen. It sounds like it might be, which I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, but like I still want the civil war to happen because it's like a final coup de grace moment, I think, for your campaign, and this is like one final big challenge. So good in that regard, but like I don't know, in generally, it does feel nice when you can like work your way to avoid these types of things, but like it's like kind of stinks to avoid them because it's like these are some like big conflicts that are, you know, no matter how big you are, a civil war is still just as dangerous generally, which is it's more exciting that way, I think. But it does feel a little out of line with like some of the rest of the game design, where it's like you can always just about avoid a civil war or something. But yeah. And if you win the Civil War, you actually create a new culture group called Hellenistic, or not a new culture group, but a new culture called Hellenistic, and you get some bonuses, pop assimilation speed, and that's cool because this is like supposed to be like the fusion of like Macedonian and like Persian and stuff, and the whole concept of like a Hellenistic culture. So yeah, that's pretty cool. It's it's like it's just like a final thing to keep. I think it's just mainly like once you get to that point where you're super powerful, here's one final like checklist of things to do. Because like once you get that strong, I usually kind of like stop playing because like you already feel like you've won. This gives you some fun things to do though, sort of at the later point in the campaign. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So for now, for once, I actually like feel compelled to actually bother going far enough to conquer, like reunite the Argead Empire, because like now there's actually like content after that, because like normally I just feel like I get bored. I feel too powerful, and then like once you're too powerful, what's the point to keep going? But this sort of gives you some stuff to do, which is kind of cool. The final thing I wanted to go through is just like run through like some of our Heo's tweets, because he's been actively sort of like showing little snippets here and there. So like that screenshot actually with Etruria forming Tusia is actually from like a month ago. And so you see that in the same game, you see Mastodon kind of blob, and it's just showcasing like some improvements to the UI. So like Mastodon hasn't just blobbed into like Dacia and Illyria. Instead, they went for like actually developed areas, and like areas Mastodon probably was more likely to go and conquer. And it also shows that Antigona's fleeing to Cyprus and yada yada yada. Here's some. Oh yeah, so the Ptolemies are more likely to keep the name Ptolemy and Cleopatra, I think, instead of just the sort of random names that you sometimes get. Yeah, so the AI are more likely to attack other like rivaling powers, which again we kind of see with the screenshot here. Yeah, this one just shows like there's now like a UI icon for when if Rome loses an eagle, which you get like I don't remember what the penalty for losing the eagle is, but if Rome like loses a big battle, they can lose the eagle, and then they need to get it back by conquering this. And this just is a little UI touch that adds that there. This showed off the Foundry a few days, like a week before it was shown in the dev diary. It shows some of the calculations for the who will be elected ruler in a republic. Here's just a screenshot of some of the AI again. It's like, man, like that is like that's just, like seeing Rome naturally expanded like that direction feels so much better. And like the Antigone is also terrifying in there, as well as the Marians. And yeah, looks cool there. Yeah, like again, like that's very close to like being in line with Rome's borders after the Second Punic War. They would well, of course they would have taken over Hispania and then North Africa. And technically, when the Romans conquered North Africa, a lot of this was a client state of Numidia, but whatever. No, we won't be too pedantic. Me not flexing, no, not at all. And yeah, so looking then like in this one, you see the Antagonids looks like they went west, conquered Macedon. Now they're reclaiming some of Asia over here. Just some cool stuff. Cool stuff. Yeah, this one I don't think is the AI. This one's too perfect, but it's just saying like you can now reforming to what is this? I think it is a dictatorship. Looks like it'll now kick off a civil war, which makes sense. Like that, if there was anything that would guaranteed cause a civil war, I think that one probably makes the most sense. Yeah. And so yeah, like now if you want to do that dictatorship, you're gonna have to fight a big civil war, which is actually like a cool little. I like the design of that a lot better. In fact, that's me commenting right there. But what I like about this is like it's not the Civil War isn't just something to avoid in this case. In this case, the Civil War is a challenge that will unlock you a better government type and as well as some free provincial influence investments. Which is like now I want to fight the Civil War because I get something out of it. You know, it's like it's cool. It's cool. I like that. Yeah. Oh, and it can be done peacefully too. So yeah, it's still an option. Showing off the Atlas map mode. Let's see some map representation. Oh yeah. So the generals now will actually appear on the map, so you know which one of your generals is fighting, or if it's like one of your allies' generals or something. Yeah. That one is just a bug, very strange one. And yeah, just showing Rome's got a lot of levies because they sure did. That was sort of their strength in the early Republic days. And I am exhausted now, so yep. I'm gonna leave links to the wiki with all the dev diaries in it if you are interested in like perusing a little bit more detailed through them. But yeah, like if you like or whatever, I don't care. Go home now. I'm tired.